So what happened? Okay, okay.
All right, there he is. I see you.
I think I've heard somebody. Finally, you sent me an email. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Yeah, but I cannot hear anything that is happening at Florida. Can you?
No, I just hear you and I see you on my screen. And I see Savya too, but I don't hear him.
Yes.
Yeah, the microphone. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I do.
Now I can.
Yes, much better.
Okay. So, shall we start?
All right, we're going to get started then before we lose the connections.
Sounds good.
All right.
So this was easy. I told Ravi yesterday we should try it, and he said, no, it's very simple.
So, can you see my slides now?
No, because you have to point your computer to the slides. I just see
yeah, I can share my computer screen with you. So
the screen is shared, so you should see it on your screen now.
You wish. Oh yes, now it's shared.
So right. you can see the slides?
That's correct. Now I can see the slides.
Okay, so shall we start?
Yeah, we'll get started then.
All right. So I am a student of hybrid group in the CNEL lab working with Dr. Harris, and today I am presenting my PhD dissertation, and I've been working on automatic assessment of disordered speech intelligibility. So the outline of my talk is as follows. First, I'll give a brief introduction about speech disorders and the evaluation of disordered speech. In the next section, I'll talk about the methodology, our framework for evaluating the speech intelligibility, and finally the experiment which we conducted to evaluate our system and prove its effectiveness. So I'll start with the speech disorder. So speech is our most common and convenient way of communication. Normal speech is remarkably powerful and efficient, and any aberration or abnormality in the speech production or communication mechanism is known as a speech disorder. A heterogeneous group of disorders exist which are caused due to disturbances in the nervous system or the muscle system. So basically it causes an abnormalities in the speech production musculature. These kind of disorders are known as dysarthria. They can occur at any age. They are very difficult to remediate, and they have serious economic and psychological consequences for the patients. And in extreme cases of dysarthria are known as anarthria. In this situation, the speech of the patient becomes totally unintelligible and worthless as a means of communication. So it is important to find ways to remediate the dysarthric speech and help with the rehabilitation of the patient. So one of the characteristics of dysarthria is that there is a cause and effect relationship between the location of the nervous damage and the resulting dysarthria. So every anatomical and functional component of our nervous system serves a very specific purpose in the speech production mechanism. Should that special function get impaired, it causes an abnormality or aberration in that special speech function. So this apparent motor speech behavior is like a fingerprint of the presence of the location of the tissue damage in the nervous system. And the primary method of evaluating a dysarthric speech is the auditory perception of a speech and language pathologist or a clinician who listens to the patient's speech and differentiates among different types of dysarthria. Dysarthria can be is basically caused by different neurological diseases such as Parkinson's disease, Huntington's disease, stroke, other neurological diseases in the central nervous system. So the human perception of speech, specifically the SLP's auditory perception of speech, is the primary way of diagnosing dysarthric speech. SLPs basically do two kinds of listening evaluation. In the first kind of evaluation, they work with sustained vowel phonations, in which the patient enunciates a vowel at a comfortable pitch and loudness, and the SLP evaluates the phonation for its pitch, loudness, and duration. The next kind of subjective evaluation is connected speech, a sentence or a paragraph. In this context, the SLP listens to the patient's speech and he attends to the overall tonality or the overall voice quality. Another kind of evaluation is the evaluation of intelligibility of speech, or how comprehensible the speech is, or in other words, degree to which the speech could be understood is intelligibility. So for evaluation of disordered speech, there are basically two methods. First is the subjective method. The subjective method is the evaluation of speech by human experts or SLPs. And the second method would be the objective method. The objective method relies on computer processing to process speech signals, whether it's from acoustic modality or stroboscopic signals or any other kind of signals, and process them using computers. In the subjective evaluation of speech, as I explained earlier, SLPs evaluate the intelligibility of the speech, and they also attach perceptual labels to the speech. For example, they can call it hoarse or breathy or rough, and often they also assign scores to these perceptual labels, quantifying the severity of the particular construct or the degree of its presence. One of the biggest disadvantages of the subjective method is the same with any committee of experts, is lack of consensus. We have poor inter-judge and intra-judge reliability. The same utterance is rated differently by the same judge at two different times, or the same utterance is also rated differently by two different judges at the same time. So this gives a poor agreement, or sometimes lack of consensus between judges. It is very expensive, or most of the times it's expensive, and it takes several sessions. Whereas for the objective method, the aim is to use signals acquired from the patient and mimic the human perception of speech. So for example, if we are trying to evaluate intelligibility of speech, we would like the objective system to closely follow the auditory perception of an SLP and follow his intelligibility ratings. And objective methods use many different kind of modalities. They can use an acoustic signal, or a stroboscopic signal, or an electroglottographic signal, and these are basically collected or acquired by electronic means and processed on a computer to give a score. Our objective method completely relies on the acoustical signal or the speech signal we record from the patient, which is inexpensive to acquire and non-invasive. Other advantages of objective method is consistency. The objective method is always consistent. It will always rate the same utterance consistently every single time. It is inexpensive, fully automatic. It is inexpensive for the acoustic measurements, and it enables easy standardization of evaluation systems or intelligibility or any other kind of perceptual construct. And finally, the SLPs or the clinician can devote more time towards the speech rehabilitation of the patient. So for intelligibility evaluation of the disordered speech, the SLPs conduct two kinds of tests. In the first kind of evaluation, the SLP listens to the speech of the patient and assigns a score quantifying the overall intelligibility, or the degree to which he could understand the speech. In another kind of evaluation, the SLP listens to a sentence or a phrase and tries to identify what he or she has heard. So, and these results are typically reported as the percentage correct, percentage of words reported correct, or percentage of vowels reported correct, and which is known as the articulation score. And this articulation score can be determined on open set or closed set methods, which basically means whether the system is text independent or text dependent. In a open set method, the patient can speak a paragraph or a speech which is not known a priori to the SLP, and he tries to evaluate the intelligibility. And in the closed set methods, both the patient and the SLP know a priori the text which is going to be spoken and try to evaluate the intelligibility. Now I'm going to give some background of research in the disordered speech evaluation. It is a relatively very new area, and very few automatic speech evaluation systems exist today, which are deployed in the clinic. Most of the systems try to evaluate either overall speech quality or one of the aspects of quality like roughness or breathiness, and almost all the contemporary scoring techniques work on vowel data, sustained vowel phonation, which is a much easier problem. But any evaluation system relying on just vowel data is not going to be a reliable estimator of that perceptual construct. For example, if we want to evaluate speech intelligibility, we want to listen to words and sentences to evaluate it correctly. And most of the research, almost all the research in disordered speech evaluation has been in this binary classification of voices into two groups, healthy and pathological. So this kind of study has a lot of educational value but very little practical value. There has been almost no research and no current approaches exist which try to estimate speech intelligibility for disordered speech or dysarthric speech. Speech intelligibility has been well researched in the speech enhancement domain. So for example, speech corrupted by noise or speech corrupted by transmission channel, for example in the cell phone networks, or to evaluate the performance of speech codecs. So these and there are many standard speech intelligibility measures which exist today for these kind of tasks. The first and the oldest measure is the articulation index. It was developed further into speech intelligibility index, SII, which was standardized by ANSI. SII, the speech intelligibility index, was further developed into speech transmission index, which tried to account for some of the nonlinearities in the speech degradation system. But basically all these approaches assume that there are 10 to 20 different frequency bands which are important for speech intelligibility, and they try to estimate the signal to noise ratio in each of these individual bands and finally combine the output from individual bands to come up with a final intelligibility score. So now I will talk about.
So maybe it's a good chance to ask if they're still alive here.
Okay.
Check.
We are. I am at least.
And Raul.
I don't know.
Hi,
Did we lose Raul?
Dr. Srivastav, can you hear us?
Hello?
Hi, Dr. Srivastav, can you?
Yes. Yeah, I've been around the whole time. I hear you.
Okay.
All right, perfect.
We'll keep going then.
Yeah. So now I will talk about the framework which we developed for evaluating the speech intelligibility. The overall system has two steps. We have the patient speech coming in. It is processed through the feature extraction system, through which we extract feature measurements, which are fed into the scoring algorithm, which is basically a regression analysis which takes those feature measurements and outputs an intelligibility score. So now I will describe the feature extraction system in detail. So before I explain this feature extraction system, which involves, we have a different setup here with auditory model and all that, I'll try to explain what we tried before this, and it didn't work. Earlier, we were trying a HMM-based approach. We trained models on clean speech and disordered speech, and after aligning a patient's speech, we came up with different metrics like the phone likelihood, overall likelihood, the different phone durations, and came up with different kind of feature measurements. But ultimately, they all turned out to be futile to predict intelligibility. So finally, we brought in the auditory model, which tries to model the biophysical mechanisms of our peripheral auditory system, and we finally settled on this system of feature extraction. So here, basically, what we have is a text-dependent system. So when a patient comes in and we record his speech, the patient is going to say a word or a sentence which is predetermined. And we are going to compare this patient's speech to a healthy speech, which is the gold standard, or the speech which is perfectly or 100% intelligible. And we compare it to the healthy speech and come up with a feature system. So this is a text-dependent setup. On the left, you see the patient speech and the healthy speech coming in. Both of them are time-aligned to match the corresponding temporal regions. And simultaneously, they are processed through the auditory model, and subsequently short time analysis happens. So I'm going to describe this in detail in the later slides. First, I will go through the individual blocks which make up the feature extraction system.
Savi, I have a question for you.
Yeah, Dr. Winspan.
So you are saying that this is an automated system, and you are having here this time alignment. Are you doing it yourself, or you have an automated way of doing time alignment?
Oh, it's all automatic. There is no manual intervention.
Okay. So what is the algorithm that you are using for time alignment?
Dynamic time warping, DTW.
Okay.
I will explain it later after this auditory model.
Okay. All right. So if you explain it later, that's fine.
Sure. So the most important block, or the functional block of the feature extraction system, is the auditory model. Now, the auditory model that we are using here is a functional model which simulates the input-output behavior of our peripheral auditory system without modeling the precise internal biophysical mechanisms. It is a computational model for human auditory signal processing. It was proposed by Jepson and Dow in 2008, and it is a second iteration, it is a newer iteration of their model, and it accounts for the nonlinearities with the basilar membrane processing and so on. The schematic of the auditory perception model is shown in the slide. So we have a speech signal coming in, which is filtered through the outer middle ear transfer function. Then it goes into the DRNL filter bank, which stands for dual resonance nonlinear filter bank. And thereafter, hair cell transduction and expansion, then neural adaptation, and finally modulation filter bank. Now I'll explain each of these steps in the auditory perception model. So the first step is the outer middle ear transfer function. So the outer ear transfer function is simply the transfer function from headphone to the eardrum, and the middle ear transfer function simulates the mechanical impedance change from the outer ear to the middle ear. These transfer functions are combined. They are bandpass transfer functions, and they are realized by two linear phase FIR filters. The next step in the auditory model is the DRNL filter bank, the dual resonance nonlinear filter bank. This filter bank is trying to model the spectrum analyzer characteristics of our cochlea. So the human cochlea works like a spectrum analyzer, and it has a frequency phase transformation. Different location of a cochlea has a filter centered at a different center frequency and a specific bandwidth. So gamma tone filter bank is an example of such a filter bank which tries to emulate the human cochlea. This auditory model employs a DRNL filter bank proposed by Medis and Puvida. So this is the next iteration in the gamma tone filter bank in such a way that it also accounts for the non-linearities of our cochlea. So the filter center frequencies and the bandwidths of our cochlea are not fixed. they change according to the input sound levels. So this model also accounts for those non-linearities. The filter bank consists of two stages. The first step is the first link is the linear chain, which is the top one, and the bottom link is the non-linear path. And the output is the sum of both the linear and the non-linear paths. The linear path dominates at the high signal levels, at the high SPL levels, and the non-linear path dominates at the low signal levels. And for the medium SPLs, it is just a compressive function. So this is the filter bank which replaces gamma tone filter bank, and the output of the filter bank is fed to the next stage, which is the mechanical to neural transduction. So hair cell transduction is a stage which simulates the transformation of basilar membrane vibrations and oscillations into hair cell receptor potentials. It is modeled by half-wave rectification followed by low-pass filtering at 1 kilohertz cutoff. So low-pass filter preserves the temporal structure at low frequencies and extracts the envelope at high frequencies. And the output of the low-pass filter is squared. Now the squaring expansion gives an intensity-like representation. The next step in the model is neural adaptation. Neural adaptation tries to model the adaptive properties of our auditory nerve. The neural adaptation circuit consists of five feedback loops. In a series chain, each feedback loop consists of a single pole complex frequency shifted low pass filter, and the output of the low pass filter is fed back to the input via the divisor. So we have a dividing element at the input of the low pass filter, and the divisor is the output of the low pass filter. So we have a chain of these 5 filters, and the time constants of these filters range from 5 to 500 milliseconds. And the time constants of these filters have been fitted on psychoacoustical data, and they are these fixed values. The behavior of the neural adaptation circuit is such that for stationary sounds it gives logarithmic compression, but whereas for the sounds which have rapid onsets or offsets, or which have fast variations with respect to time, those are enhanced, and yeah, those are finely enhanced. The output of the neural adaptation circuit is fed to the next step, which is the modulation filter bank. Modulation filter bank consists of single pole band pass filters, and the design is such that for center frequencies below 10 Hz, all the filters have a constant bandwidth of 5 Hz, and for all the filters above 10 Hz, we have a constant Q value of 2. And all the filters are complex frequency shifted first order low pass filters. Band pass filters. The output of these filters will be a complex value. And for filters which are centered above 10 Hz, we take the absolute value of the output. So this is comparable to taking the Hilbert envelope of the output. And for filters below 10 Hz, we take the real part of the filter output.
I don't understand where you get the complex values.
The transfer function of the modulation filter bank is the pole of that filter is a complex number. So the final quantity that we get in the output is also complex numbers.
Well,
so.
But why do you use a complex number? I mean, the information is where? Is in the amplitude, right?
Yes, that's correct. So this is the filter bank designed by Jepsen and Dow for their model. So I am just using the filter bank that they designed.
Well, okay. I mean, but you see, you have here a very elaborate front end.
Yes.
You know, there's a lot of stuff that goes into this front end.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, all of these steps are very important. For example, the neural adaptation step is very important. If we take out the neural adaptation step, the output will not work. So, for example, just gamma tone filtering or cochlear filtering alone is not enough. We need the later stages of the model to finally get this output. So the output of the modulation filter bank is like an envelope of the complex sounds, some complex sound input, which is resolved at different gamma tone or the peripheral auditory channels and the modulation channels.
Yeah, you know, and then it's more than that, because this thing is amplitude sensitive,
Yes.
as mentioned, and there is no information about because, you know, transfer functions for a nonlinear system do not characterize the system. And you keep on giving us the characteristics that are associated with linear models while you are working in the nonlinear model. And I have not seen anything that tells me how these characteristics change with amplitude. Because basically you have an Amberstein model, right? You have a linear system followed by a nonlinearity.
Yes, you are right. So the parameters of that DRNL filter bank, for example, the number of filters in the cascade, the number of gamma tone filters in the cascade, all the parameters related to those nonlinear paths, they are fitted based on human psychoacoustical data. So they measured the psychoacoustical data from human cadaver ears, and the specific parameters of this model are fixed based by fitting that human psychoacoustic data, so that this model can perfectly predict forward masking phenomena and different psychoacoustical phenomena like that.
Yeah, I understand. You know, this is very intricate. You know, but my point is that I don't think that the characterization that you are providing is sufficient. You know, because I like to see at least a figure or, you know, or a formula that tells us how these characteristics change with amplitude, right? Because, you know, this is a nonlinear model.
Yes, yes.
So,
Anyway, this is
Savya, when you implemented this model, you validated it by cross-checking its output through a variety of psychophysical data, which has output at different input and output, or model output for different input levels.
Exactly.
If you show that data, it'll help alleviate some of this concern. I mentioned that in my notes that I sent to you as well. I think that's important to put in.
Yes, I can do it. Yeah, I can show a series of plots. For example, you can have input simple sinusoidal tone, and we play it at different sound pressure levels, and you can see the output being dominated by the linear path or the nonlinear path. Yes.
okay.
And so the output at the modulation filter bank level is known as the internal representation, and it is a 4-dimensional quantity. So all the signals right now are in time domain, and we have 4 dimensions. The first dimension is the time. The second dimension would be the gamma tone or the DRNL filter bank. The third dimension would be the modulation filter bank or the modulation filter bank center frequencies, and the fourth dimension is the model output, the amplitude of the model output. So we have a 4-dimensional quantity which still holds all the temporal signals, but they are resolved in according to different DRNL filter bank center frequencies and modulation filter bank center frequencies. Now we talk about the time alignment step of the model. So for time alignment is a process by which we match the temporal regions of two utterances which correspond to each other. And when comparing two utterances, it is important to take into account the variation of speaking rate, which is uneven throughout the duration of the utterances. Dynamic time warping, or DTW, is a technique for comparing such two utterances, which is basically based on dynamic programming. So given two utterances, we calculate the feature measurements from that. For example, MFCC, and calculate a dissimilarity matrix, which is a symmetric matrix, and it holds the dissimilarity or distance between every pair of frame in the two utterances, and then we use dynamic programming to find the least path of least distortion or least overall dissimilarity, and that gives us the time alignment between two utterances. The next step in the model is the pitch analysis or pitch extraction. For pitch extraction, we use this algorithm called swipe prime. It was proposed by Camacho and Dr. Harris. The swipe prime algorithm outperforms all the current algorithms on datasets which include normal speech, musical instruments, and disordered voices. And swipe prime is the only algorithm which is much better than the other contemporaneous algorithms for measuring the pitch for disordered voices. And another characteristic of swipe prime is that aside from pitch estimates, it also gives us estimates of pitch strength. So pitch strength is a variable which allows us to determine the degree to which the sensation of pitch exists. So the sounds which elicit a strong sensation of pitch will have a higher pitch strength. So the pitch strength variable helps us to segregate sounds based on their sonority, and pitch strength is also inherently normalized, so it is always between 0 and 1. You can have input sound at different sound pressure levels, but the pitch strength number will always be normalized. And all the voiced speech has pitch strength above 0.2, and all the unvoiced speech has pitch strength less than equal to 0.2. And we use the pitch strength estimate in our algorithm to segregate frames based on their sonority. The next step in the model is the framing and the correlation. So I'll describe the entire feature extraction process now. So once we have disordered speech or the patient speech coming in, we have a corresponding healthy speech, and both the speech signals are first time aligned and processed through the auditory model. So in this figure, the dashed arrows represent multi-dimensional quantities. So at the output of the auditory model, we have a four-dimensional representation for both the healthy speech and the patient speech. Now we segment that four-dimensional representation into frames using short time processing. Every output for every single gamma tone channel and modulation frequency channel is split into frames using a rectangular window without any overlap, and the length of that window is the inverse of the modulation channel center frequency. So for every gamma tone channel and every modulation frequency channel, we segment the internal representation into frames, and the time alignment information from the DTW step is used to match the corresponding frames of the healthy speech and the patient speech. And we find correlation between the matching frames of the healthy speech and the patient speech. So at this point, we again have a four-dimensional representation of correlation values between the corresponding frames. Now in the next step, we group the frames into two categories, namely low and high pitch strength categories based on a threshold value of 0.2. And in the next step, we average all the correlation values within every acoustic channel or every gamma tone or the DRNL filter bank channel. So this will result in a feature vector which will be twice the number of acoustic channels. So for every gamma tone channel, we have segmented or partitioned our frames into low and high pitch strength categories. So we get a feature vector which is twice the number of acoustic channels in the auditory model. And finally, it is this feature vector which is used in the later step for scoring. So Now I'll explain this.
So before you go on,
Yeah.
I would like to ask you a couple of questions. So you did all this, you program all this yourself, or was there a package available that you just simply used?
Can you repeat your question?
So my question regards how you did all this, right? And now I would like to know if you had to program all this yourself, or if there was a package available that you just used.
No, it has to be, all the modules had to be programmed by myself, yeah. There is no package available.
All right, so you have to do all this, right? So now a question that any engineer will like to answer is, how important is each one of these modules for the end result?
Yeah, so each of these modules are very important. I have tried, so for example, in the auditory model, before I had this full-blown auditory model, I was just taking the output of the gamma tone filter bank, which is the first step, but the output of the gamma tone filter bank, the correlation between those or other features derived based on that were not giving the desired result. Then we found that the neural adaptation step is an important step. The output of the neural adaptation step.
Savi, is one of my concerns about your dissertation is that is very, very thin on results. Your results are a table. This is very thin for a dissertation, in my view. So, what my suggestion is, I would like to find out what is the importance of each one of these modules, or the modules that you think are most important, and show me results without some of the components and with the overall model. Because, you know, this is a very complicated system, and I have no idea if it's necessary.
Yes.
You understand?
Yeah. So for example, as I was explaining, within the auditory model, also I have gone step by step and added those steps which were important. So, for example, if I
Savi, you are explaining very well, my friend, in words. I like to have numbers.
Yeah, I can do the experiment where I can take out one of them.
That's exactly what I'm asking. Is that it is important, in my view, to really show, in terms of performance, the importance of the most important blocks.
Okay. Yes.
Because you just give me the results with the best system. You don't tell me the importance of any parameters, and there are many parameters on all this stuff, right?
Oh,
and so,
actually, yes, go ahead.
And so I would like to see this in the results section. You understand?
Yeah. So, for example,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Principe.
Dr. Harris.
Yes.
Is Dr. Harris there?
Yeah, he's there.
He is reading his email, huh? So I want, you understand my point?
Yes. We were talking, can you hear me now? We were talking yesterday about his design decisions, right? So he's made all these decisions, but hasn't really justified them.
Exactly.
But through the process, he actually did. He implemented many things that he's not even talking about, and he made decisions based on results and data, but he didn't tell us the story.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he has to put that in the dissertation, right?
Yes. So, for example, instead of this pitch analysis where we are segregating pitch frames based on pitch strength, earlier I had what they use traditionally in the speech enhancement arena. I was using RMS levels of the frames, and I break down the RMS level, the ratio of the RMS level of the frame to the ratio of the RMS level of the entire utterance, and I split them into 3 categories of RMS, because different RMS levels of different frames contribute to different amount of intelligibility. But once I replace that RMS level based system with this pitch strength based system, which gives us an inherently normalized variable and is very high, most accurate for determining the pitch of the disordered speech, the performance of the system improved appreciably and it became very robust.
So that is what I would like to see in numbers.
Yeah.
Okay. Please go on.
Okay. So the next step of the system is to take the feature measurements and come up with a intelligibility score. So this is the equivalent to the task of regression, where our feature vector is the predictor or the regressor, and our intelligibility score is the response variable or the regressant. So I'll briefly explain for the regression analysis. Let's assume we are given a data set of n observations, and it is a d-dimensional data set, which means input feature measurements are a vector of size d and the output targets are a scalar. And given, so we can assemble all our training vectors along the rows, and we create this n by d feature matrix and a vector of targets of all our data set observations, vector y, and together this is our data set. The simplest model for regression is the linear regression model, where we just, the function is a product between these weights and basis functions. So these we can apply any arbitrary linear or non-linear functions, basis functions, to the input variables.
That equation is not linear.
Yeah, basis functions can be non-linear. That is not a problem because the system is still linear in parameters. The weight parameter, it is linear.
So linear in the parameters is different than linear regression.
I'm saying what I'm saying is linear regression is linear in parameters. So within this linear regression,
you are inventing a name. Linear regression means that I have to have W transpose multiplying X. That is what is linear regression. If you have W transpose times a function of X, that is non-linear regression. And it turns out that the way you wrote it is linear in the output space, in the field.
I must say, these basis functions are fixed. We are not trying to fit the function. These basis functions are fixed. So we can have a fixed non-linear function.
That's a non-linear function of X. Correct?
Okay.
That's a non-linear function of X.
Yeah, but it
not change the nomenclature. I mean, this is what everybody is saying.
But it will be still be linear in the parameters, right? It is still linear in parameters.
Let's see. There are 3 types of systems that you are not understanding. There are linear systems, non-linear systems linear in the parameters, and non-linear system non-linear in the parameters.
Yeah, but this one is linear in parameters because...
So don't call it linear regression.
Okay.
Because linear regression is W transpose X.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
Okay? That's just the only thing I'm saying. You know, because for instance, this phi can be a neural network, right? A neural network does not give you linear regression.
Yes, but in that neural network, we are also trying to adapt one of the parameters in phi. But here the phi.
If you want, there is now the extreme learning machines, for instance, that never adapt the hidden layer parameters. So they are fixed and they are still nonlinear. Yes. This is a nonlinear regression model.
Okay, I make this change. So the linear regression model is the simplest model, and so
not linear regression.
Yeah. No, I mean, we get rid of the basis functions of W transpose X. Linear regression is the simplest model. And if we take the design matrix, this capital X, we can get the pseudo inverse of the design matrix, and the pseudo inverse of the design matrix multiplied by your target vector will give you the estimate, the map estimate of your weight vector for linear regression. So this is the simplest model of regression. The next model of regression that we try is the Gaussian process regression. So in linear regression, we restricted the function f to be a linear function of inputs, and there is only one fixed f. And so a Gaussian process regression is an approach where we allow more functions or more f's to be to enter into our calculation, and we assign probability to every possible function. Now there can be uncountably infinite set of such possible functions, and Gaussian processes or GP provide a framework to make this approach computationally tractable. So by definition, Gaussian process is defined as a collection of random variables, any finite number of which have a joint Gaussian distribution.
So I'm a little confused, Savi.
Yes.
Yeah, so what is the difference between a Gaussian process regression and a nonlinear regression?
See, in Gaussian process, in linear or that nonlinear regression, we are having one f. In the end, we have one f which is based on the parameters. Whereas in Gaussian process regression, we are allowing different f's or different functions, and the faith we have in our function is encoded in that prior probability of that function.
No, you end up with a system that is also fixed after training.
Yes, but see, we are allowed, for example, in that weight vector we see here in this equation, if we allow a distribution over the weights, let's say I assume that my weights are distributed as a Gaussian.
But I don't think you have used that feature, because you never really discuss the prior probability on the Gaussian model. You are using simply this equation working with combinations of the Gaussian functions.
Yes. So, because if you look in the Gaussian, in the linear regression, our weight vector is fixed, right? But here we are allowing a distribution over the weights, which is our parameters of the model or the free parameters.
But you never use this. You see what I'm saying?
Yes, I'm using this. I'm using Gaussian process regression, yeah.
I don't think you are. Because if you use Gaussian process regression, you are going to give me a probability at the output. You never showed me a probability at the output.
Yes, so what I'm doing is we have a predictive distribution, right? Predictive probability distribution, and I'm taking the mean prediction.
So this is regression. What is regression? Is the expected value of y given x.
Yes.
So you are never using a Gaussian process regression. That's what I'm saying. You are using all these buzzwords, and you are not exploiting the features of Gaussian processes.
Yes.
So yes. So that is not right.
No, I mean the Gaussian process, it helps in nonlinear processing, so we have the kernels coming in.
I understand all this. What you have effectively done is called a kernel recursive least square algorithm, because you are taking the expected value. The beautiful thing about the Gaussian process is it gives you the distribution at the output, and you never use it. You just if you take the mean, this is equivalent to a kernel filter.
Yeah, yes. If I take the predictive mean of the predictive distribution, that will be equivalent to that filter, yes.
Yeah, so why are you giving me all this stuff, when you are not using it? It would be much simpler to say that I'm going to use kernel recursively squares.
Yes, so yeah, we tried different regression methods. So finally, we have settled upon the support vector regression. That gives the best model and the parsimonious model. But this was...
You don't have all this stuff because you are not using it. You understand?
Yeah.
Because the beautiful thing would be, you know, if you show me at the output what is the variance for each one of the values, then you are taking advantage of the Gaussian process regression. But the way you invented it, you have no advantage of this.
So since you're taking expected value, you might as well make this much simpler.
Much simpler.
Finally, for our final system, we are going for the support vector regression because that is a much more parsimonious model. But this was another thing we tried, and it works well.
Anyway, I'm just saying that if you are going to keep this in your dissertation, in my view, you should take advantage of it.
Yes.
So, what you should be doing is for this particular model, you are going to show me the predicted distribution at the output. Okay. Each value, you are going to have the distribution.
Yes.
So that will be, then you can keep this stuff. If you're just going to show me the mean value, as you did in the table with all the others, you don't need any of this.
Yeah, I will do that.
So that's what you understand my point, right? That's
yeah.
Let's move.
So what are you going to do? You're going to just simplify it to this kernel method.
Yeah, we can either simplify to the kernel method or show the variance. Yeah, we can simplify to the kernel method. Yeah.
Either way, you do what you think is better. But my point is that presenting all this theory about Gaussian process regression and then just talking about the mean doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, you raise a very valid point. You're correct. Actually, if I just use the mean of the predictive distribution, yes, I am reducing it to that kernel regression, recursive least squares. Yes.
Okay.
And so the next regression method that we tried was the support vector regression. The support vector regression is a little different from the previous regression methods we discussed. So in support vector regression, the basic idea is that we are given targets, which is our variable y, and we want to come up with a function, prediction function f, which predicts our targets which have at most epsilon deviation, at most epsilon absolute deviation. So we can rewrite our old regression model, W transpose X plus B, and the main idea which I just conveyed right now can be simply put down in these terms. We want to minimize the squared norm of our weight subject to the constraints that our maximum deviations are epsilon. So this is the very basic or simple idea behind support vector regression, and minimizing the norm of W helps with the regularization. And there's entire theory behind it, the empirical risk minimization, but I'm going to skip over all that and give you the main idea behind it. So basically, our main idea of having at most absolute epsilon deviation is encoded in the constraints of our optimization problem. So here, the constraints of our optimization problem encode that main idea, and the optimization objective function is just the norm of our weight vector. And there's another addition is the cost term. So we introduce these slack variables. We are, for some of the input data points, we are allowing some slack into that epsilon deviation condition so as to make this problem feasible for optimization. And this is the very basic idea behind support vector regression. So this is the optimization problem written in primal form, but equivalently it can be written in dual form, where you will see these input feature spaces coming as inner products which can be transformed into kernels, and it is much easier to solve in that form. So finally, the support vector regression that we use in our work, we use a different flavor of support vector regression known as new support vector regression. The only difference is that in new support vector in normal plain vanilla support vector regression, we have to choose a value of epsilon a priori for the entire data set. But in new support vector regression, it allows us to adapt this value of epsilon according to the data throughout the data set. And nu is a parameter which can be chosen a priori between 0 and 1, and it has such a property that asymptotically the max number of support vectors that we'll have after training will approach the value of nu. So it gives a very sophisticated and a simple framework of training our regression models. So this is the support vector regression model is the final model which works best for us. And finally, to evaluate the output of our prediction or the intelligibility assessment, we use the following metrics for evaluation. The first one is the mean square error, which is very simple. It is the mean of the squared norm of the error. The second is the correlation coefficient between the actual target variable y and the predicted target variable y hat. And finally, we calculate the straight line fit between y and y hat. So the slope and the offset of the straight line would give the performance metric. So for perfect prediction, we should have slope of 1 and offset of 0. So now I will discuss the intelligibility assessment experiment that we did. So
before we go on, okay, so let me just look at this and tell you what I think. Okay, so again, I think that you are giving us the best results because you tried others that you don't show. My opinion is you should show them.
Okay, yes.
Because, you know, all of these things have free parameters. You know, I don't have any idea what are the free parameters that you pick. I would like to find out at least what is the methodology that you did to pick the best parameters, right? I mean, if I go to support vector regression, right? You know, you have the kernel size, you have the select variable. How do you pick this thing?
Yes, I picked this with grid search. I made a huge grid and I did an exhaustive grid search and found the parameters. Yes, you are right. For example, the new parameter, the kernel bandwidth, yes. The cost C parameter.
Right. So those things need to be there and they are not there, right?
Yes, I need to add that. Okay, yeah.
Exactly.
I am very brief.
The other thing is, I don't understand, you know, the value. I really don't know what is the advantage of using adaptive epsilon in your data set. So it would be probably nice if you showed me results with the conventional support vector regression and then show results with the new support vector regression, and for me to find out how much I gained with that extra flexibility of creating that adaptive parameter. You understand?
Yeah. Yes.
So those are the things that I think you have to bring to the discussion and to the results. Okay?
Yes.
The third point, you know, I think that in terms of, you know, the kernel regression and the support vector regression, they use basically the same functional space, same basis.
Yes.
But you are using two different criteria. So
yeah.
it would be probably nice that when you present, you know, go from the kernel regression to the support vector machine regression, that you say the big difference between these two is the cost function, right? Because you are going to end up with the hinge loss instead of using basically the quadratic loss that you are using in the support vector regression, right?
Yes, you're correct.
I think it would be nice to kind of, you know, for people that don't understand this, you know, it would be nice for you to help them understand why you are using two different methodologies that use in kernels.
Okay. Yes. That,
all right.
That will make sense. Yeah. So Dr. Srivastava's lab collected a speech database of Parkinson's patients covering the different stages of disease. So this database was collected from patients in the VA hospital, the motor movements disorders clinic at UF, and other PD support groups in and around Gainesville. So we have a database of 48 patients, and we have recorded a total of 160 sentences from these patients. The database uses 15 sentences from the SPIN database for the text so that they form a phonetically well-balanced set. Now, all the patients, all the recordings were done at 48,000 kilohertz sampling rate using a solid-state recorder, and these speech samples were perceptually rated for intelligibility by human listeners with normal hearing. And we had a total of 9 judges. These judges were from the Department of CSD at UF, Communication Sciences and Disorders. And all the listening experiments were conducted in a soundproof booth, and the stimuli was delivered to the listeners using high fidelity headphones. The rating of these speech samples was done on a ratio scale from 100 to 1000, where the score of 100 represents perfectly intelligible speech. And the ratio scale is such that a score of 200 implies that that utterance is twice as unintelligible as the perfect intelligible utterance, or the utterance which has a score of 100. So similarly, a score of 300 would imply that that utterance is 3 times as unintelligible as the utterance with the score of 100, which is the perfectly intelligible speech. Now, every sentence was presented to the human judge or listener 10 times in random order, and the response for that particular sentence or that particular utterance was calculated as the average score of those 10 trials. Then the final score of an utterance across all the judges was calculated as a geometric mean of the scores from the judges. So this data, for this database, we have this big database. It took a lot of time for us to collect. It took us a few years to collect these because it was hard to come by Parkinson's disease patients who were in the later stages of the disease or whose speech was severely disordered. But finally, yeah, now we have this big database. And for the healthy utterances, we use the SPIN speech database. It is an open database for speech. It consists of all healthy speeches, and there are 150 recordings or 150 utterances for each of the single sentence. So we come up with 10 template healthy sentences or exemplar sentences by using hierarchical clustering, and these template healthy utterances or these healthy sentences are the ones which are used for later processing. For this Parkinson's disease database, we manually segmented these database to clip out different words from these sentences, and we clipped out a total of 485 words from these utterances. The reason for going for a word-based system instead of a sentence-based system was the problem with time aligning. DTW fails at time aligning disordered speech sentences. So next we moved for HMMs. We trained our HMMs on clean speech using TIMID database and all the open source database.
So after all, it's not automatic, huh?
Yes, it is. I mean, for word, our word system is automatic. There is no manual.
Segmented everything. So you manually segmented stuff. So it's not automatic, David. Right?
The database.
Segmenting the words.
Yes, yes. But you see, when the patient would come in, and if it is our word system, the patient would just say that word. If a patient comes in, we won't record his sentence and then manually clip the word.
I see.
Manually segment the word. So when a patient comes in, he would speak a word, a sentence, a phrase. So we would got many different types of recordings and then analyze it. The reason for going to that sentence level approach was the failure of time aligning of sentence level speech for disordered speeches. So we trained.
I know that that's a very difficult problem, Savi, and that's the reason why I asked you in the beginning, and you told me that everything was automatic.
Yeah, so everything is automatic for word level. So if we have a patient coming in and he says a word,
okay,
everything is automatic. No manual
intervention. This is already a great advance, no question. Okay. But I was under the impression, the way you were explaining before, that this was automatic for sentences. Anyway, okay, it's clear now to me, so it's good.
So next we used this database for testing our intelligibility evaluation system. So first of all the utterances were downsampled to 16 kilohertz prior to any processing. And once we have a patient speech coming in, we match the patient speech to the 10 healthy templates that we have for the healthy speech database, and we choose the best matching template for further processing. And for our DRNL filter bank, we have 20 frequency channels covering a frequency range of 63 Hz to 8 kHz, and all of them are equally distributed or equally spaced on the ERB scale. And similarly, for the modulation filter bank, we have bandpass filters, 8 bandpass filters with octave spacing and center frequency ranges from 2 Hz to 256 Hz. So for these, for example, these parameters, 63 Hz to 8 kHz, they have been all the speech intelligibility evaluation, even in the speech enhancement domain. Look at this frequency band because this is important for evaluating speech intelligibility. So this basically covers the spoken speech ranges, right? 63 Hz to 8 kHz. And for the modulation filter bank, it is the frequency range from 2 Hz to 250 Hz, which is recommended, which affects the human speech intelligibility. So these are the parameters based on psychoacoustical studies. And for the swipe prime algorithm for measuring pitch, we used a pitch search range of 30 Hz to 800 Hz. So all the spoken language or spoken American English pitch falls within this range of 30 Hz to 800 Hz. And a pitch strength cutoff of 0.2 was used to partition the frames. So finally, we have a feature vector of dimensionality 40, since we had 20 DRNL filter bank channels, and we split them on pitch strength in two categories. So we have a feature vector of size 40. So for linear regression, we used a linear regression model with bias and identity basis functions. So just X, W transpose X. For Gaussian process regression, we had a kernel which was a summation of the Gaussian kernel and the noise covariance kernel. And basically the hyperparameters of the GP model can be optimized using conjugate gradient algorithm. We have the overall likelihood of the model. So unlike support vector regression, where I have to resort to a grid search, for Gaussian process regression, the hyperparameters of the model, like the kernel bandwidth and all these values, can be automatically adjusted and learned using the conjugate gradient algorithm or any other minimization algorithm. And for support vector regression, we use a simple Gaussian kernel and train the model using an SMO type algorithm, which is a basic iterative algorithm. The procedure of our simulation was that we ran 100 independent simulations, and every simulation included these steps. We first split the database into train and test sets using stratified sampling, and 2/3 of the database was used for training, 1/3 was used for testing. All the utterances were processed to compute the feature vectors and the feature matrices, and then the train set feature data was used to fit the regression models, and finally the fitted models were used to predict intelligibility on the test set, and we calculate the performance metrics based on the predictions. So finally, this is the result that we got from our intelligibility experiment. As you can see, all the three methods, if you look at the R value, they are pretty much similar. All of them perform well. They give an R value of above 0.9, and support vector regression gives the best value of 0.92. But GP is also giving almost the same value. They perform equivalently, actually.
So, Savi,
yes,
so my friend, you made 100 independent simulations. You took the mean. You present a table with no variances. Why is this?
Oh, yeah, I should.
Huh? I mean, you have the data. Why do you show me just the mean?
Yes, I need to add that. Yeah, I should have added.
Because, you know, if you put there the standard deviations, you can really start talking about significance.
Yes.
But right now, 8.895 may be significant different from 0.18 or not. Depends on the standard deviation, but you don't put the data, so these results are very, you know, too simple for the amount of work that you did.
Yes, I need to add that, yeah.
You understand? You know, so this is a general remark with respect to your dissertation, is that you did very good work, but the way that you present the results, it's just like a report at the end of the semester. You know, this is a thesis, my friend.
Yes, and add more.
So this needs to be changed accordingly.
Yes, I agree.
Good.
Okay, so the next experiment we did was based on ASR, or automatic speech recognition. So as I explained earlier, SLPs also calculate this articulation score. So in this kind of subjective evaluation, they listen to the patient's speech and try to identify the number of words they could understand. So we try to set up a similar kind of experiment where we use a text-independent ASR system to recognize the text of entire sentences. So we have our Parkinson's disease database, and you use the entire full sentences for the intelligibility evaluation. And for our ASR system, we choose the Google Speech API, or the Google Speech Recognition System. It is the state-of-the-art, or among the best speech recognition systems out there. And we processed all our utterances through the Google Speech Recognition System, and the output of the system is the recognized text and a confidence score. The confidence score is between 0 and 1. From the recognized text, so we have the original text, or the known text, which was the sentence, and we have the recognized text. From these two, recognized and the known text, we can do string matching and find out the number of deletion errors, or the number of word deleted, the substitution errors, the NS, the number of words substituted, and the insertion errors. So of the sum of the quantities that are calculated in to reflect intelligibility would be the overall accuracy or the correctness. So we used accuracy, correctness, and the confidence score to try to predict intelligibility based on these three predictors. And the final correlation of the fit that we got using linear regression was 0.76, which indicated not so good performance. So we found that ASR based system was not good at predicting speech intelligibility for the kind of task we had in our database. So if we had collected a database and evaluated intelligibility based on the articulation score, then I would surmise that this ASR based system would give a much better correlation. But since our original subjective intelligibility evaluation task was very different, so this ASR based system doesn't help in this task. So this was another thing we tried out to see if ASR system could help in this intelligibility evaluation system. So finally, to extend this approach to sentences would be the very first extension that we would like to do. And the only modification that would require in this system would be the modification the time alignment step. If we can come up with a time alignment system which can time align disordered speech, because time aligning healthy sentences is easy, but time aligning disordered speech with healthy sentences is a difficult task. And I have an idea that if we train the HMM models on disordered speech, and once we have a patient speech coming in, we, based on the probability, we basically put the clean speech or the healthy speech model, HMM model, and the disordered speech model and join them in a graph, and then find the best path through the HMM, then I think it would give a much better alignment. But for that, we need a disordered speech database which is phonetically transcribed, which don't exist right now. And the next experiment would be to try this system on other diseases. So we have come up with a system to process dysarthric speech, and we had a database from Parkinson's patients. So we can try this on other patients like stroke patients or Huntington's disease patients, which would help in validating the framework we have developed. And the next task would be to do ranking or ordinal regression rather than having an intelligibility score on a continuous scale of 100 to 1000 or a 0 to 5. We can go for ordinal regression or rank, where we rank that a particular utterance is better in intelligibility or worse in intelligibility than a given utterance. And for that, we need to make modification in the scoring step, and instead of our simple regression models, we have to go for the ordinal regression models, and that would give us the ordinal ranks or the scores for the utterances, which are exactly ranks, ordinal ranks, not scores, qualitative scores. And so yes, so finally we have developed a framework for assessing the intelligibility for disordered speech, especially for the Parkinson's patients. The system consists of two steps. The first step is the feature extraction, and the second step is the scoring or the regression analysis. And we tested our system, or we evaluated our system on a database of Parkinson's speech patients, which consists of 48 patients and 160 sentences. And we got a correlation value between the subjective scores and the predicted scores of around 0.9, more than 0.9, which shows excellent agreement. And yeah, finally, these are some of the presentations I did on material similar to this, like the roughness of speech based on the DAO model or on this auditory model. Yeah.
All right.
So.
Okay. So Jose has asked a lot of questions. I bet you have more questions.
You should come here.
No, I have enough questions. But the last question for Savi is the following. So after looking at this dissertation, you know, I think that you have to improve the quality of the write-up.
Okay.
That is my main thing. You know, I liked what you did. You did everything very, very thoroughly, very, you know, carefully. Although this is a dissertation that is kind of putting together lots of pieces, you know, so the novelty is in the system integration. It's not in any of the aspects of the processing or nothing like that. You know, but I think it is a very nice. Are you guys listening to me?
Yes.
Okay. So I think that this is a very nice, you know, system, you know, and I think it has to be properly, you know, motivated. I think it is motivated, but you need to make the results justify all the sophistication on the methods, right?
Okay,
That's the only thing I think it's needed. Because I really like the So this is my opinion.
Let me sit down.
Okay.
The final question.
Yeah. So I wrote down things that you had talked about.
Okay.
Just let me, during the defense, you mentioned a few things, right? The Gaussian process could be much simplified since he's just taking the mean.
Exactly.
His design decisions throughout the entire thesis, right? He just chooses things it doesn't justify and chooses a more elaborate model, doesn't say why it has to be more elaborate.
Yeah.
How we determine the free parameters in all these cases, he should say some more things about. Linear regression, he needs to be clear when using that term.
Yeah, that's right. That's all minor things.
Yeah, and the final table, he needs to have the variance when he averages those numbers. So.
Because it would be nice to really answer the question, John, is nonlinear regression really needed, right? Because, you know, I think the front end is doing everything, frankly.
Yes, it's doing the heavy lifting, yeah.
So it will be interesting, you know, to show all that, you know. So you have done the experiments, you know, and if you present the intermediate results, this is a nice, very nice dissertation, you know, and it helps others, you know, see exactly what is the importance of each one of the little pieces. And that, I think, is very important for science and for the others.
He also wants to publish a paper on it, and he won't be able to publish it without this other thing. So.
Exactly. So I think that you know, I think it's a very solid work, but it's not properly, you know, presented in terms of results. Instead of one table, I would like to see many tables and say the importance of taking this block out. Here is the results. Do you understand? Because this tells you the importance of each one of the pieces. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think it will be great.
Okay. So, Dr. Srivastav, are you?
Yeah, I'm here, and I've been listening, and I think I agree. There's a lot more work that you've done than what shows up in the text. So by making all the suggestions that Jose is saying, I think that'll really highlight the value much better. So I think you should include that. There are a couple other things I think you can improve upon or add on. One is, I think throughout the document there's you tend to use quality and intelligibility synonymously. You kind of go back and forth between the two, but they are not the same things. Quality is largely laryngeal. It's what's going on at the vocal fold level. And in fact, you know, the papers you suggested when we started using the Dow model, our goal was to utilize the output of that to predict quality. Again, purely laryngeal. You've taken the next step and tried to predict intelligibility, and the perceptual data we have is on intelligibility. It's not on quality. There's a separate data set for the same stimuli which might be quality related. So in your writing, you should be able to differentiate the two, and all the measures, the stroboscopy, the aerodynamics, the acoustic, everything that you mentioned, they're all quality measures. I don't think there is a very standard automated system for evaluating intelligibility, which is why this project was funded by the VA. And you know, what you're doing is contributing to providing sort of a baseline of what could be done with acoustic analysis. So try and separate the two things instead of confusing them throughout the document. The other thing which I think is really valuable is you're using a very different feature set here instead of MFCCs, which everybody uses for just about everything under the sun. So I think some description of what this feature set gives you, which is above and beyond what you could do with MFCC, some comparison would be very valuable, not just for this, but for a lot of other work, because I think that's a big bottleneck for 20, 30 years. It's MFCC and HFCC, maybe that's about as far as it's gone. But nothing else has come beyond it. So I think that's a really important contribution of your thesis that doesn't show up in your writing at all or your presentation.
Okay.
And then the third thing is even though this is intelligibility, Parkinson's disease patients will have a problem with quality and with intelligibility. So they are somewhat correlated. So some effort to show that your measure is actually tracking changes in intelligibility and not just in quality may improve this better. So, you could run something like CPP, capsular peak prominence, or something like that, which are gross measures of quality to show that your model output is not highly correlated to quality, maybe to CPP, maybe better, or even pitch strength. Pitch strength is another thing that we found to be very closely correlated with changes in quality.
Yeah. So yes, initially in the old system with the roughness, I was using CPP, pitch strength, and MFCC, but those features turned out to be not good for evaluating intelligibility. So I had to go to the auditory model kind of processing.
Right. No, I completely agree, and I think it's about time somebody did more than MFCCs. So I'm glad that it showed up the way it is, but I think including that in your dissertation will add a lot of value to show that the feature metric you're using is superior for this problem than MFCC. That doesn't show up in your writing.
Okay.
Yeah. So for example, when you do the time alignment, you're using MFCC there.
Yes.
But then when you actually do the sophisticated comparison, you use this other feature set.
Yeah.
And so you jump between them, but you don't really say why. Why didn't you use DTW?
In fact, even in the discussion, if you could add a couple of paragraphs, pages, whatever it takes to just summarize what the new feature metric captures that's not captured by MFCC, I think it'll be really useful.
Yes, because this is an envelope-based processing. We are extracting the envelope at every peripheral channel, whereas MFCC is a very different idea.
So these design decisions that Jose harped on, not just numerically saying, well, this is better than this one, the data shows it, but to try to put some reasoning of why these choices are better in each of these things, not just the table. The data says it, right? There should be something more intuitively why you think it's working better.
Good.
Okay.
Do we need to meet without Savya?
Not for me.
So we're good. So he's going to make these changes.
Okay.
What time frame do we think it'll take to make these changes?
Well, actually, the deadline for submission is 25th, 5 p.m. So whatever it is, I have to do it before then.
All right. So the committee, do you think these changes he can be done by the 25th at 5 p.m.?
3 days? No.
All right.
I think it's going to be very hard, right?
Yeah.
Because I expect that, I would say I don't need probably 10 tables, but I need at least 5 tables to really show the importance of each one of the building blocks, and I don't know how available you have to go to run the data again, right?
Yeah.
And it's got to be written appropriately, and the committee needs to read it.
Written appropriately and all of that, right?
This cannot go on 5 p.m. on 25th. I have to go there at least a day before so that they have to read it and see the formatting.
So the deadline is in 2 days, effectively.
So I think you are going to get clear prior for the fall.
So clear prior, you have to finish, what, before the first day?
Yes.
The signed form, but the document gets submitted later.
Clear prior might buy you another week or 10 days here, so I would check into that.
Problems with the OPT, that's why Shannon asked me not to do clear prior last semester. I have applied for the OPT and I'm an international student, so clear prior is for American students. Because that...
Okay. Well, so we're going to work out. Obviously, we don't think we can do it in 2 days.
I can So I can add all these suggestions which Dr. Srivastava said.
So you need to tell the committee now that you're saying that you think you can do it in 2 days?
No, not all of them. I can add about the design decisions. I mean, I can easily talk about why these freak parameters. So for example, a lot of the parameters in the auditory model, all of them are fixed based on the psychoacoustical data, like the number of filters inside the DRNL filter bank. The parameters in the linear step, the nonlinear step, all those are based on the psychoacoustical data. And finally, like the models of the entire auditory.
But it's not. It's like, but that's not the point, Savi. The point is to show the importance, for instance, of the modulation module, right? What is the importance of the modulation module for the end result? That is a very important thing. You understand?
Yes. The modulation filter
so
bank.
That is the thing that I believe. You see, since you came up with you decided and very well to use the best possible auditory model out there, right? And I think this is a golden opportunity to really show the importance of a good auditory model. Do you understand?
Yes.
So this is what I think. It's something that needed to be properly quantified in tables. Not saying this is the best result.
Yes, actually, the first step that I started was that I didn't use the modulation filter bank because it gives a big 4-dimensional output. I was using a single modulation filter.
Exactly.
Which was just 150 Hz. And then I added the modulation filter bank and found that, yes, it gives much better results. We need to look across different modulation frequencies. Just one filter, one single modulation filter won't do it.
That's the point.
You have those results?
Yep.
Okay, so if he has already these results, maybe he can do it in 2 days. I mean, I'm not going to say that he needs to work 2 weeks on this. And I think, John, you are going to be the judge of the end result. So as long as these aspects are properly translated and quantified in performance tables, I think it's fine if you can do it in 2 days. I don't have anything against it.
Yeah, for example, when I was coming using the model, I had gone, as I said, gone step by step. I had added the modulation filter bank without the modulation filter bank. Then instead of the pitch strength analysis, just the RMS analysis, and it was walking through these steps that I eventually ended up with this model. So yes, I have done this before. I don't have to write a new code in MATLAB to come up with the numbers. Good. I have to run the old stuff.
Good. So I mean, so it can be maybe able to do it. But that's fine. Let's try it. I'm always for trying.
How long does it take to run this and average the 100 numbers? Just your table. How long does that take in computer time?
Less than a couple of hours.
Less than a couple hours. Is that a couple hours?
Less than that.
Okay.
Less than that.
All right. Okay, so we'll see what you can do, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
So that will.
We can do it. Let's go for it.
And if he doesn't, then he goes clear prior, and we face whatever dangers Shannon has for us there.
Okay.
Jose, did you send that paper?
Yeah, I'm going to send it today.
Okay. Maybe if he sends it to Rahul.
Rahul, yeah.
So.
Okay.
You'd be quick to send it to Rahul.
If Rahul sends me, his email address, his postal address right now, I can send it to him.
Yeah,
I'll email it. Or if Savya has it, you can email it too.
Okay, fantastic. So I email it to you, Rahul.
But you need it soon because it's close to 5, right?
Yeah, I mean, but here it's 7.
Yeah, I can.
It's 7.
I just sent you the address. It should be on your email.
All right, so you have it now.
Yeah. So there is time to get this overnight.
Okay.
All right. You know that Rizwan is here visiting me.
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
Yeah, you know, let me see if he is in the office. Just a minute.
Okay. Yeah.
No.
Raul,
Yep, I'm here.
so you doing well?
So far so good.
How come your video is not on?
Well, my webcam is on my laptop and I forgot the charger at home, so I'm using my office computer.
I know things are a little primitive there in Michigan.
Oh, John. John?
Yes.
So we are creating here the mini department of electrical engineering.
So
Hey,
there's a
Rizwan.
lot that I'm learning from Europe, John, that we can learn from.
Good.
You
You're going
know?
to bring it back with you.
No, unfortunately, the system in the U.S. is not set up to operate like it does here.
So we decided to create an electrical
Yes.
engineering department here.
I think the only way we can actually compete is to actually have satellite centers in Europe, because there's a lot of things that are a lot more cost effective. And I've seen this in IMEC, I've seen this in EPFL. I'm talking to
Yes, Victor. Yeah.
No, Victor, what's his name?
Yeah, I know Vitor.
Yeah.
There's a lot of there's a lot of things that are more cost effective.
I think there's pluses and minuses, I suspect.
Yes. Yes. So that's why you want to have 1 foot there, 1 foot here. But
That's good. Anyway, I thought it was interesting,
Yeah.
that we were discussing and which one was there in the office. So.
yeah.
Oh, well, good to see you.
All right.
Likewise.
I guess neither one of you is going to make the faculty meeting today.
Yeah.
I guess not. But you can say that you talk to us and we are
Yes.
thinking about the department.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Bye.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, Raul, we'll be talking then.
Okay, sounds good. I'll wait for the document and sign it and ship it over to you.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds good.
All right.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good work, Savya.